Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is the top of the new year, and this is usually the time we all take a breath, look back, and maybe try to map out the future.
It is, but if you look at the sheer volume of information we've been sorting through, it feels like the world didn't get the memo.
Right. No pausing at all.
Not even for a second. It's this incredible paradox playing out in real time. On one hand, you have these moments of global celebration, and alongside that, some truly stunning scientific progress.
The kind of stuff that just a few years ago sounded like science fiction.
Exactly. Breakthroughs that could genuinely extend the healthy human lifespan, but that's running right alongside this deep, churning uncertainty. And that uncertainty is everywhere.
Everywhere. From, active geopolitical hotspots like the Taiwan Strait or the war in Ukraine, all the way down to the very stability of the global economy.
So our mission today is to try and make sense of this. We're taking this mountain of global events, these pressures, these breakthroughs, and building a kind of structured shortcut for you.
So you can get a handle on the most critical insights of the new year without having to read 1,000 different articles. We've got everything from major political shifts in the U.S. to the next evolution of AI.
And some very intense military and humanitarian crises in Europe and the Middle East.
But, as we always do, we prioritize. And today we are starting with what could be the highest impact story of them all.
It's a finding in aging research that is, and I don't use this word lightly, truly stunning. It gets right down to the fundamental biology of how we grow old.
Okay, so let's jump straight into the lab. For years, we've heard the term immunosenescence. It's a mouthful.
It is. It just means the natural decline of our immune system as we age.
And that decline is what opens the door for a lot of nasty things. Higher risks of chronic inflammation, cancer, heart disease, all of it.
Right. But the big question has always been why? What's the specific trigger? What's the signal that kicks off this decline? It's been a frustrating black box for a long time.
But that black box is starting to open up.
It is, and the key, it seems, is a protein. This is where it gets really fascinating. The whole discovery revolves around something called platelet factor 4.
PF4 for short.
PF4. And it sounds technical, but what the research shows is a direct link between this one protein and the health of our most fundamental cells, our stem cells.
So walk us through the core mechanism. Why is the decline of this one protein, PF4, so important for aging?
Well, it's not like PF4 just vanishes one day. Its levels in our body just naturally go down as we get older. And PF4's job is to be a critical signaling protein, a cytokine.
A messenger, basically.
A messenger, yes.
Yeah.
Its job is to regulate how quickly our hematopoietic stem cells divide and create new cells. And those are the precursors for all your blood and immune components, your red blood cells, white blood cells, everything.
So PF4 is like the factory manager, telling the production line how fast to run.
That's a perfect analogy. And when the manager gets old and the signal gets weaker, when immunosenescence kicks in, the stem cells just go haywire.
What does that look like on a cellular level?
They start proliferating way too much. And this leads to what scientists call pro-mutational instability. So to use your analogy, the factory floor loses its manager and just goes into hyper-speed production, but with no quality control.
So the cells getting produced are faulty.
Often faulty, or worse, they are prone to mutations. And that is the direct biological pathway to age-related diseases. That's how it starts.
That makes the connection so clear. But
Yeah.
the real aha moment in the research wasn't just finding this correlation, it was what happened when they tried to reverse it.
Exactly. The researchers didn't just stop at observing. They conducted some really aggressive experiments on older mice. They went in and actively tried to restore the PF4 signal.
That won't happen.
When they successfully brought the platelet factor 4 levels back up in these older animals, the results were just, well, dramatic. The signs of aging they saw in the blood and immune cells essentially reverted.
Revert to what?
To a younger and healthier state. That's the quote from the paper. It's a functional, measurable rejuvenation of the body's core immune factory.
And this isn't just a theory about mice. The reports we read confirmed they saw similar results with human cells.
Yes, very promising responses when PF4 was restored in human stem cells in vitro, so in a lab setting. Which, brings us to the profound implications of all this.
Right, because now you have to think about the challenges of getting this from a petri dish or a lab mouse into, say, a 70-year-old person who just wants to stay healthy longer.
That's the next great hurdle, isn't it? We're moving from pure biology to translational medicine. If we can successfully target PF4, and that might not be by injecting the protein itself.
What would it be then?
More likely, it would be developing small molecule drugs that mimic what PF4 does. But if we can do that, we have a potential new strategy to combat multiple age-related diseases all at once.
All at once, that's the key.
It is. We're talking about maybe enhancing the immune response to things like pneumonia or new flu variants, reducing the chronic inflammation that causes so many problems, and potentially lowering the risk of cancer and cardiovascular issues that come from an unstable blood system.
When you think about our rapidly aging global population, the significance is just impossible to overstate. This isn't about immortality.
Not at all.
It's about extending the health span, the
Yeah.
number of high-quality years of life, which I think most people would agree is a lot more valuable.
Absolutely. It's about building a better infrastructure for global human health.
Well, speaking of infrastructure, the hunt for better health starts in the lab. But all that data, all that research, it has to live somewhere.
It does. And that brings us to a significant, and I have to say, a pretty melancholic moment from NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
We're looking at this evolving landscape of scientific infrastructure, and I guess the inevitable collision between physical history and our all-digital future.
It is. We're talking about the permanent closure of the Physical Research Library at NASA's Goddard Space and Flight Center.
And this wasn't just any library.
No, this place was a genuine treasure trove. It had extensive physical collections on space science, aeronautics, mission histories. Its closure is a direct result of, budget constraints and this massive shift toward purely digital information systems.
But the scientific community isn't just taking this lying down. The reports we saw were filled with concern. It's not just about losing access to old books.
No, it's about losing the collaboration. It's that classic trade-off, isn't it? You save some money today by going all digital, but you might lose those crucial, unplanned moments.
The water cooler moment.
Exactly. The moments where real innovation used to happen, down in the stacks. A digital archive is amazing for accessibility. You can search and download from anywhere in the world. But that physical library was a cornerstone. It fostered serendipitous human collaboration.
You bump into a colleague, you start talking about a book you just found, and suddenly an idea is born between two completely different fields.
You lose that. You risk losing that spontaneous synergy, that physical hub that helps generate new ideas. It's a major cultural shift in how scientists will engage with archival materials from now on.
That really is the cost of efficiency. So let's shift from the physical storage of knowledge on Earth to the immense scale of the cosmos itself. NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory just delivered something absolutely spectacular.
Oh, this is cosmic drama on the grandest scale imaginable. Astronomers using Chandra captured the merger of two massive galaxy clusters. They've named it the Champagne Cluster.
And just to remind everyone, galaxy clusters are the largest known structures in the universe that are held together by gravity.
They are. We're talking thousands of galaxies, unimaginable amounts of superheated gas, and these huge reservoirs of dark matter all bound together.
So seeing two of them collide is like getting a front row seat to how the universe is built.
That's precisely it. This collision generates immense shock waves that compress gas and amplify magnetic fields. It's letting us measure the kinetic energy involved in universal structure formation.
And it helps us understand the hot plasma that fills these superstructures, right?
It does. And that plasma, by the way, holds more mass than all of the stars in the cluster combined. So yeah, it's an unprecedented look at how gravity shapes reality on the largest scales.
And on a slightly smaller, but still unimaginably energetic scale, it seems we're also rethinking how stars explode.
We are. The traditional view of a nova, a star explosion, was that it's a simple, instantaneous event. A single bang.
But new research suggests it's more complicated.
Much more complicated. They're now being seen as complex, multi-stage processes. New research, using continuous observation, monitored two specific stellar explosions and found huge variations.
All kind of variations.
One nova showed immediate collisions of gas streams almost instantly after it detonated. But the other one, and this was the big surprise, it delayed its powerful light-emitting eruption for over 50 days.
Wow, and why is a 50-day delay so important? What does that tell us?
It's the smoking gun for theories about how gamma rays are produced in these events. The observation confirms these long-standing models that predicted complex shock waves clashing in layered outflows of gas.
So the delay creates the conditions for these shockwaves.
Exactly. Whether the collision is immediate or delayed, it's these shock waves that accelerate particles to incredible speeds, and that is what produces the intense gamma rays we can detect. It fundamentally changes our view of these events from simple fireworks to complex, drawn-out processes.
Okay, so moving from the biggest explosions in space to, well, what might be the fastest growing collision right here on Earth, artificial intelligence.
The growth of AI in 2025 was just, it was unparalleled. It has penetrated every facet of daily life now.
From the search engine you use to your personal assistant to the back-end data analysis that runs financial markets and medical diagnostics, it's completely indispensable.
And that speed is driving these inevitable and very intense questions about ethics, global competition, and the future of work itself.
The competitive landscape is heating up fiercely. For a while, the conversation was dominated by these huge, well-funded American companies.
It was. But now, a Chinese startup, DeepSeek, is making some serious waves with a breakthrough focused on efficiency. Their goal is to train larger, more powerful models for less money.
This feels like a very strategic counterpunch.
It's absolutely strategic, and the technology is specific. DeepSeek has introduced this new framework they call manifold constrained hyperconnections.
Okay, MHC. What does it actually do that makes training AI cheaper? We need the technical mechanism here.
It's pretty clever. What MHC does is it allows for the dynamic grouping of related data points, the hyperconnections inside the neural network.
And that's different from how it's normally done.
Very different. Historically, if you want to scale up an AI model, you face this massive linear increase in the demand for GPU memory, graphics processing unit memory. That's the expensive bottleneck.
Right, the hardware.
The hardware. By grouping and constraining these related data manifolds, DeepSeek drastically reduces the demand on that critical, expensive GPU memory. It means they can train massive models, we're talking from 3 billion up to 27 billion parameters, on cheaper, less powerful hardware.
So they're outsmarting the hardware problem instead of just throwing more money at it.
That's the essence of it. Their research is showing robust empirical evidence for this. It signals a major commitment within the Chinese AI sector to this kind of rapid collaborative innovation designed specifically to overcome the architectural limits that constrain their Western rivals, who have been focused primarily on just raw hardware power.
That is a very calculated move. It completely changes the cost of entry in the global AI race. Now, let's pivot from the people building these tools to the people trying to regulate them.
And for that, we look to Southeast Asia, specifically Malaysia.
Malaysia has taken a major regulatory step with a new law, the Online Safety Act, or ONSA, of 2025.
Correct. And this act requires major social media platforms to get local operating licenses. They're being very explicit about who this targets too.
Who's on the list?
WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Basically, any platform with over 8 million local users now has to be licensed by the Malaysian government.
And the motivation here seems pretty clear. The government wants more accountability for harmful content, and they're trying to address a huge surge in online crime.
A huge surge is right. The financial losses were reportedly over 2.7 billion ringgit in 2025 alone. So on paper, it looks like the government is taking a strong grip.
But the big question is, will it actually work?
That is the big question. Analysts are pretty skeptical that just requiring a license is going to solve this systemic problem. The license gives the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, the MCMC, some leverage. They have the power to revoke it.
Sure.
But past experiences all over the world show that platforms don't really change their behavior just because of a piece of paper. The consensus is that you need much more stringent enforcement mechanisms for there to be any real change.
Like the kinds of frameworks being talked about in other countries.
Exactly. Analysts are pointing to models like the one proposed in Australia, which includes strict international age verification. A licensing fee for a company like Facebook is just a cost of doing business.
But mandatory age verification or robust, enforced content moderation, that's much harder for them to just ignore.
Precisely. It's a classic governance challenge. You have these high intentions, but you're facing this massive inertia from global platforms that operate everywhere but are only being licensed locally.
That sense of pressure and regulation extends right into the political sphere. Let's start with the shifting landscape in the United States, where history was made in New York City just after midnight on New Year's Day.
The swearing in of Zohran Mamdani as the new mayor of New York City was a moment just layered with historical and political significance.
I mean, he's the first Muslim, the first South Asian, the first Indian origin mayor of the nation's largest city.
And his personal story is central to his political identity. He immigrated from Uganda to New York when he was just 7 years old.
The ceremony itself was also intensely symbolic. It wasn't held at City Hall.
No, it was held in a historic, decommissioned subway station. And for the oath of office, he used 2 family Qurans, but also, very significantly, a 200-year-old Quran that belonged to Arturo Schomburg.
The celebrated black historian from the Harlem Renaissance.
That choice was a powerful statement. It was a deliberate act of inclusion, linking his own diverse background to the deep history of black culture and intellectualism in New York City.
And he campaigned on a platform that really defines the modern progressive urban agenda.
Aggressively so. Rent freezes, universal childcare, free public transit for all New Yorkers.
But the reports we reviewed were quick to point out the massive challenge he now faces, which is turning that social media momentum he built into actual governance.
Right. His political identity is already being used against him. The opposition is labeling him a leftist and predicting his failure before he even gets started.
And his biggest challenge might not even be local. It could come from Washington.
There's a looming tension with the current U.S. administration under President Trump, who has already publicly threatened to cut federal funding to New York City.
Citing disagreements over political and immigration policies.
And that threat immediately puts all of Mamdani's progressive spending plans in serious jeopardy. It's a tough spot to be in from day one.
That friction is part of a much broader and, frankly, very complicated narrative playing out in Washington, D.C. right now.
It is. President Trump just recently issued his first vetoes of this term, and he rejected 2 bills that were actually backed by his own party, by Republicans.
What were the bills?
One was aimed at completing a water pipeline project in Colorado. The other allocated land in the Florida Everglades to the Miccosukee tribe. The administration's official reason was fiscal responsibility.
But the political fallout from that suggests there might be more to it.
Well, according to some, yes. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who is a huge proponent of that Colorado water project, immediately went public and criticized the veto.
And she didn't just criticize it, she linked it to something very specific.
She did. She linked the veto to what she called potential retaliation over her advocacy for the release of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein.
Now that is a highly specific and explosive allegation. If there's any truth to that, it takes this from a simple policy disagreement into the realm of high-stakes political retribution.
And it highlights some very deep internal divisions and power plays happening within the Republican Party itself.
Absolutely. And we saw another major development in the broader investigation landscape with the release of some closed-door testimony from Special Counsel Jack Smith.
This was testimony concerning the January 6th investigations. And what's crucial here isn't the political spin from either side, but the actual judicial insight it provides.
Smith stated under oath that a key witness he had relied on for certain allegations was themselves relying heavily on hearsay.
Not first-hand evidence, hearsay.
And that fact alone allegations against President Trump.
In legal terms, hearsay is inherently less reliable than first-hand testimony, so its prominence in a key witness's account immediately raises questions about whether those specific charges could ever withstand rigorous judicial scrutiny. It hands critics a significant talking point.
And it definitely alters the accountability landscape. Finally, on the domestic front, the administration had to back down from a very high-profile move.
They did. They reversed their plans to deploy the National Guard to major cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland.
This was after swift legal challenges, right?
Yes, most notably from California Governor Gavin Newsom, who cited concerns about state sovereignty. The administration ultimately had to concede, which signals that even under the guise of security, these kinds of federal power grabs will face immediate pushback from state governments that are willing to go to court over the constitutional limits of federal intervention.
From that domestic friction, let's pivot to what is arguably the highest stakes geopolitical tension point on the planet right now, the Taiwan Strait.
President Xi Jinping's New Year address was, as expected, incredibly assertive, and it was framed by a massive show of military strength.
He said unequivocally that reunification with Taiwan is unstoppable.
He did, and that rhetoric is backed up by these recent large-scale Chinese military drills all around Taiwan. Beijing frames these as a response to perceived separatist threats and to significant U.S. arms sales to the island.
And while Beijing always says it prefers a peaceful reunification.
The readiness to use force against any move toward formal independence remains the absolute foundation of their policy. There's no ambiguity there.
And Taiwan's response, led by President Lai Ching-te, was equally firm. It was outright defiance.
Absolutely. President Lai vowed to defend Taiwan's sovereignty and called for a significant increase in defense spending for 2026. But what's really crucial strategically is his warning to his own people.
What was the warning?
He said that internal division within Taiwan is what signals vulnerability to Beijing. He argued the biggest threat isn't necessarily the Chinese military, but internal political fracturing that Beijing can exploit. He really emphasized the need for national unity.
But Taiwan's security concerns aren't just about jets and ships. We saw reports about a striking espionage case that shows the other ways a nation's security can be undermined.
This is a perfect example of non-conventional warfare. The case involved a Taiwan Navy Sergeant, Chen Yumin.
And what did he do?
Due to some serious personal financial problems back in 2022, he sold sensitive military secrets directly to Chinese intelligence agents.
Wow.
This kind of breach just underscores a vulnerability that's often overlooked. The exploitation of personnel based on financial distress. Economic pressure can compromise national defense just as surely as a missile can.
And we have to connect this tension over Taiwan to the broader U.S.-China global competition. It's now moving into a new arena, one that could impact the global dinner table.
It could, yes. Latin American agriculture.
So this isn't just a side project. This is a direct challenge to the U.S. sphere of influence.
It is. China is pouring billions into massive agricultural projects across Latin America, and these projects are explicitly designed to sideline U.S. farmers for years to come. The long-term goal is to gain massive market share in agriculture, and by doing so, challenge U.S. regional dominance and its agricultural exports around the world.
So the geopolitical rivalry now scales from who controls the most advanced AI chips and who has the most powerful navy, right down to who controls the global food supply chain. The complexity is just staggering.
It really is.
We have to move now to the active conflict zones, beginning with the brutal war in Ukraine, where the new year was met with tragedy and, as always, a fierce information war.
Russian reports detailed a Ukrainian drone strike that happened just before midnight on New Year's Eve. It was in a village called Korli in the Kherson region.
And the target was reportedly a cafe and a hotel that were filled with people celebrating the new year.
Yes, the toll was tragic. At least 24 civilians were reported dead, including a child, and over 50 injured.
And an incident like this immediately becomes fuel for the intense disinformation battle that really defines this entire conflict.
Instantly. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed they extracted navigational data from a downed Ukrainian drone that proved Kyiv had also targeted President Putin's residence in the Novgorod region.
And they labeled this an act of state terrorism.
But what's fascinating is the immediate counter-assertion from Kyiv. They completely rejected the claim, asserting that any attack on Putin's residence was a Russian-orchestrated false flag operation.
Designed to manipulate public opinion and justify escalation.
Exactly, to distract from the ongoing fighting. This duality of claims means every major event is now filtered through two opposing state-driven media machines. We even saw an EU diplomat publicly reject Russia's claims, which highlights the international effort to try and manage this narrative war.
And on the military front, Russia has been reporting progress in expanding their defensive buffer zone, which is a key strategic goal for them.
It is. The chief of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov, reported significant success there. He claimed the liberation of over 700 square kilometers of territory in December alone, including the strategic city of Volchansk.
And the goal of these operations is to push Ukrainian troops and their long-range weapons further away from the Russian border.
That's the explicit aim, to push them back in the Sumy and Kharkov regions. Now, Ukrainian officials deny claims of any large-scale encirclements, but the Russian goal of extending this protective zone remains very clear. It forces Kyiv to defend a much larger, more dispersed front line.
Meanwhile, any prospect of a peace deal seems more distant than ever, with President Zelensky setting some very clear red lines in his New Year address.
He was absolute on this point. He said he would refuse to accept any kind of weak peace deal. He emphasized that any resolution must fundamentally safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and its future security.
Which indicates that for Kyiv, victory cannot involve giving up any of the currently occupied territory.
That's right. And that hard line just underscores the diplomatic stalemate. There is currently no functional middle ground that satisfies the core demands of both nations.
And that brings us, tragically, to the humanitarian catastrophe that is still unfolding in Gaza. The reported casualty figures are almost incomprehensible.
They are just devastating. They illustrate the sheer severity and the concentrated nature of the military operations there. Reports we're seeing indicate that over 10% of Gaza's entire population has now reportedly been killed in this conflict.
1 in 10 people.
When you internalize that number, 1 in 10, it highlights the extraordinary pressure on every single system: healthcare, sanitation, basic human survival.
And compounding this crisis is a significant action that was just taken by Israel.
Yes, they've revoked the operating licenses for 37 international aid organizations, forcing them to suspend their operations inside Gaza.
What's the immediate impact of that?
The logistical impact is severe. We did see that the United Arab Emirates successfully delivered about 7,300 tons of aid, but the larger operational capacity that these 37 non-governmental organizations provide has been severely hampered. This cuts off critical supply chains and distribution networks at a moment of absolute maximum need.
And the United Nations has condemned this move.
In the strongest possible terms, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres voiced strong opposition, and he specifically targeted the Israeli amendments that are aimed at limiting the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA.
And his argument.
Guterres argued that UNRWA's operations are absolutely essential for implementing the existing UN Security Council resolutions about humanitarian access. The Arab League, for its part, views this as a direct violation of international law and a threat to Palestinian refugee rights. The political and humanitarian pressure around aid access is just continuing to intensify.
Shifting our focus a bit north, we need to note the rise in maritime security concerns beyond just the Black Sea. We're now seeing them in the Baltic Sea as well.
We are. The threat of non-conventional sabotage seems to be elevated across the board. Finnish authorities just seized a Russian-owned cargo vessel, the Fitberg, in the Gulf of Finland.
The vessel was traveling from St. Petersburg to Israel, and it's suspected of intentionally damaging undersea telecommunications cables.
Yes, after apparently dragging its anchor for an unusual distance in international waters. Helsinki police are investigating it as aggravated criminal damage and interference with telecommunications.
Why is this one incident so alarming for the whole region?
Because similar incidents have occurred recently, and it's raising serious concerns about potential acts of state-sponsored sabotage targeting critical infrastructure. Given the heightened NATO naval presence in the region since the invasion of Ukraine, any interference with undersea cables, which are the literal pipelines of global data, is viewed through a lens of intense geopolitical tension.
It's a perfect example of how a conflict can spill out into the digital and physical infrastructure far away from the actual front lines.
It is. And we are also seeing escalating internal unrest in the Middle East, specifically with pressure mounting on Iran's regime, driven largely by economic collapse.
The cost of living and severe economic protests are spreading across Iran.
They're fueled by hyperinflation and a massive devaluation of their currency. The situation has already turned deadly. We have reports of a Revolutionary Guard member being killed alongside multiple civilian fatalities in the violent crackdowns by security forces.
And these protests, which are rooted in basic financial desperation, they have echoes of the 2022 Women Life Freedom movement.
They do, in terms of the profound frustration. Despite the violence, the government has made this controversial offer to engage in a conditional dialogue.
But analysts are highly skeptical of that offer.
Very skeptical. It's often seen less as a sincere effort to find solutions and more as a tactic to temporarily quell the unrest, divide the protesters, and just buy the regime some time. The persistence of these protests is a critical test for the regime's long-term stability.
Shifting now to migration issues, the United Kingdom is under immense political pressure after some alarming statistics were released about crossings in the English Channel.
Migrant crossings of the Channel surged in 2025. The final number was nearly 46,000 people.
Which is the highest annual total since 2022.
It is, and that number places intense political and logistical pressure on the UK government to find effective, humane, and legally sound solutions to border security. It's a topic that continues to dominate their national political discourse.
And part of the tough approach the UK government is defending involves the very complex and controversial case of Shamima Begum.
Yes, the UK government has stated it intends to robustly defend its decision to strip Shamima Begum of her citizenship. She's the woman who left the country as a teenager to join ISIS.
And this defense is happening at the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR.
And the specific challenge that the ECHR is looking at is crucial. They are questioning whether the UK government adequately considered the possibility that Begum may have been a victim of grooming and human trafficking when they revoked her citizenship.
So it's a question of culpability versus victimhood.
Exactly. It highlights this incredibly complex legal and ethical line that governments have to walk, balancing national security against the protection of potentially vulnerable individuals who may have been coerced. This case could set a major precedent for how Western democracies handle citizens who join foreign terror groups, especially when they were minors.
Finally, let's look at some complex diplomatic alignments and sanctions, specifically regarding Russian energy influence in the Balkans.
Serbia successfully navigated a very complicated diplomatic path and secured a waiver from the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC.
That's the branch that handles sanctions enforcement.
It is, and this waiver allows the Russian-owned Petroleum Industry of Serbia, or NIS, oil refinery, to resume operations until late January. The refinery had been forced to halt production because of crude oil shortages caused by the existing sanctions.
So this is a temporary exemption.
A temporary exemption that illustrates the kinds of complex geopolitical compromises that are required to stabilize crucial regional energy sectors, even when it involves Russian-owned entities.
And linking back to Latin America, the U.S. is engaging in military action against alleged narco-trafficking routes that are linked to Venezuela.
The U.S. military conducted lethal strikes on 3 boats in the Pacific that they identified as narco-trafficking vessels. This resulted in 5 reported fatalities.
And the Pentagon is framing this as part of a campaign against Venezuela's alleged drug trade.
Yes, referring to the Maduro regime as a narco-terrorist entity. And on top of that, the U.S. sanctioned oil tankers that were accused of helping the regime evade the existing restrictions on its critical oil industry.
But the reports we reviewed also provided some important context here, noting that critics are questioning the U.S. motives.
They are. Some suggest the actions are less about drug enforcement and more about regaining control over Venezuela's very large nationalized oil reserves, and they reference past seizures that happened under former President Hugo Chavez. It just makes it clear that in international relations, security issues and profound economic interests are almost never separable.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.